John chapters 14 through 16 record Jesus' final teaching before his crucifixion. Speaking with his 12 apostles, Jesus discloses information vital to the kingdom of God. Among the many wonderful things Jesus said in those 3 chapters, chapter 14, verse 6 stands out as one of the greatest. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. Ironically, a few hours later, the Roman governor Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" Jesus had just said to his disciples, "I am the truth." Pilate asks him a few hours later, "What is truth?" Though posed nearly 2,000 years ago, today's Western culture can relate to Pilate's question. Previous generations considered truth absolute, true for all people, in all places, for all time. Absolute truth stands apart from individual experience or opinion. In contrast, relative truth, which dominates Western culture, empowers the individual to define truth for themselves. Therefore, contemporary culture confronts Jesus with the same question Pilate did on that fateful night. What is truth? You say you are the truth, but what is truth? Though enticing, it's not easy to dismiss absolute truth. Regardless of theological or philosophical persuasion, most people agree on one universal principle: do to others as you would have them do to you. A careful survey of civilization finds this thread woven throughout the fabric of human history. No matter the person, place, society, culture, religion, or irreligion, humans generally agree that if I want to be treated well, I should treat others well. Atheists call it altruism. Believers in the Bible call it the golden rule. Since it occurs in numerous and varied religious or moral systems, one must acknowledge that not all truth is relative. If an accepted standard measures all people in all places for all times, then right and wrong must exist. The Bible agrees that the golden rule is an absolute standard that guides a genuine believer in God. Jesus taught, "In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you." Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. The Lord goes on to say, "This sums up the law and the prophets." To put it another way, the golden rule summarizes the entire Old Testament. However, Jesus taught that one command exceeds the love of one's neighbor. He says in Matthew chapter 22, beginning in verse 37, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it: you shall love your neighbor as yourself." Similar to the golden rule, loving God first is an absolute truth. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments, says Jesus in Matthew 22, verse 40. According to Jesus, truth flows from the love of God and the love of one's neighbor. How does one love God? Jesus demonstrated his complete love for God by obeying his Father's will. He says in the 14th chapter of John, verse 31, "That the world may know that I love the Father. As the Father gave me command, so I do." Jesus expects the same of us. "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." John 14:15. To submit to the will of God without reservation is how we love God. Submitting to his will completely. That's how I show my love to God. God's nature forms the basis for his will. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. 1 John 1:5. He is righteous or holy. And because God is holy, he expects people to pursue holiness, to think or act in ways that are congruent with his nature, with his holiness, if you will. When someone acts or speaks contrary to God's nature, they commit sin. Similarly, if they treat their neighbor poorly, they commit sin. Thankfully, God reveals to us what pleases him and what displeases him. As I close this presentation, I encourage you to consider the presentation that Tad Morris gives on sin. He talks about sin and how God defines sin in his word. While watching that video, I encourage you to take a few thoughtful moments to consider the question, how have I sinned against God or against my fellow man?